Crusader Kings 3, developed and published by Paradox Interactive, is a wonderful video game that is truly unique. In it, you play as a character in castle times, ruling over counties, duchies, kingdoms, or empires, while at the same time trying to build your dynasty to greatness. Genre-wise, the game is classified as a grand strategy, a genre that is typically played on a large map that has you making strategic decisions to get ahead of other players, but this also has a lot of RPG DNA. Instead of being the embodiment of a nation like other games such as Europa Universalis or Civilization, in CK3 you play as one character and live out their medieval life as a ruler. It is still played on a world map and you'll still be flicking through a lot of menus, but the focus is on characters rather than the nations themselves. Like an RPG, these characters have stats that determine how effective they are at ruling, as well as traits that will affect how you play these characters and how AI characters will act in certain situations. You've probably heard it said before, but Crusader Kings 3 is basically medieval The Sims, but instead of running a household, you're running a land racket. The game takes place over a roughly 600-year period, with start dates at 867 and 1066. You will be born, grow up, marry, have children, and guide them the best you can, but in CK3 the only character you can truly control is yourself. When your character dies, you will resume playing as your heir, who, up until this point, has been living their best AI life. While you can't directly control other characters, you can do your best in life to set up your family as much as you can. You see, unlike other grand strategy games, CK3 is about building your family dynasty up more than it is building up your country. Once you've got a member of your dynasty on a throne, it is a perfectly acceptable strategy to leave them to rule and acquire a new one for yourself. The end goal of CK3 is to have as many family members ruling as much of the world as possible, but it's up to you how you want to get there, and you've got a lot of options. Be it warfare, subterfuge, diplomacy, careful marriages, or just straight incest, you can do it all to make your house as grand as possible. For reference's sake, I've been playing CK3 here and there since its release in 2020, with a total of 250 hours. That's not quite as much and as fast as me getting 400 hours in Hearts of Iron 4 in a year, but that's still a lot of time spent. It's hard to decide when to review a game like this because it really is a forever game that I could just spend another 250 hours and still learn new things, but I think and I hope that I know enough about this game to give a decent opinion on it. To add to this, I've purchased all the DLCs as they've released and can't really speak to how the game is without any of it. I can tell you that the game was a little bare bones at release, probably contributing to me not playing that much of the game in the beginning of its life cycle. It has been substantially buffed up in the years since with DLC and free patches, making the game a much richer experience. DLC-wise, you're safe to skip them pretty much all starting out, as the free patches that come with them were quite beefy. If you want to get some DLC though, the two I'd consider must-haves are the Royal Court and Tours and Tournaments. Before I get into the gameplay of CK3, I feel like the presentation of the game must be discussed first, as it is pivotal to the experience. This is a beautiful game. The new 3D models breathe such life to it. They're pleasing on the eyes and make it easy to distinguish between different characters. They're also dynamic, meaning there is a number of different factors that will display on characters, such as wounds, sickness, disfigurement, or aging. In comparison to the static portraits of CK2, these models make the passage of game time feel more real and the game events feel tied to your character. If you lose a duel against a rival, you will see the scars on your character. It's also cool to see how children turn out relative to their parents, as genetics do play a part in how characters look. You can dress up your royal in tons of different period and region appropriate garments to make something of your liking. The game has been out long enough now that there are a number of different clothing mods that flesh out the different parts of the map with unique clothing that doesn't affect gameplay in any way. These characters really come into their own in the event pop-ups that happen, with subtle animations illustrating the mood of the occurrence. Doubly so if you own the Royal Court expansion and can see all of your associates in the one place. Though with so many people to remember, most of them are just nameless faces who vaguely have something to do with you. I imagine that's what real courts were like. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. CK3 is what is affectionately referred to as a map staring game, meaning when you're not flicking through menus and reading event pop-ups, you're going to be staring at the map considering your next moves. Luckily, the map in this game is beautiful to look at. I could stare at this map all day. When you zoom in, you get to see your beautiful countryside and baronies, and when you zoom out, you get an eagle-eye view of all the duchies and kingdoms around you. The map intuitively changes based on your zoom, allowing you to easily see everything you need to see. Compared to the other Paradox titles, there is a lot less switching between different map modes. This contributes to this game feeling like, for lack of a better term, a next-gen Paradox game, as it is not only a looker, but the UI innovations brought forward by this game make it their most accessible game to date. None of these things, though, bolster the accessibility in CK3 more than its greatest feature, the nested tooltips. The biggest barrier to entry with grand strategy games is that they are often Byzantine in nature, with dozens of interconnected mechanics to learn, not to mention a bunch of old-timey terms that before playing this game, I didn't understand. Well, you are able to mouse over pretty much anything in the game and get an explanation to what it does and what it means. Don't understand the explanation? CK3 to the rescue. If you middle-click on the thing you've hovered over, you are then able to hover over the explanation and get information on the terms used. Think of it the same way you do a Wikipedia hole, clicking on link after link, getting to the bottom of something. It's goddamn genius, and a revelation to this genre. On top of this, there is an in-game encyclopedia where you're able to look up different terms used by the game, and it can be very handy. It doesn't completely eliminate the need for YouTube guides and Googling things that confuse you, but it's a massive step in the right direction. This game can be bloody confusing, and it can be difficult to know where to get started or even what to do, but this is helped largely by the notification system. At the top of the interface, you can see a bunch of notifications, alerting you to things that need your attention. Whenever you get lost in the game, you should just check your notifications and start from there. It's the equivalent of chopping down some trees when you get overwhelmed in a survival game. Just click some notifications and you'll be fine. There is also something of an on-screen journal that sits nicely in the UI which you can pin different things to keep track of. Your domains, interesting characters, your armies out on the field, it's super useful. The UI as a whole is both readable and very nice to look at. All this combined makes CK3 probably the most welcoming grand strategy there is to new players. The game features a dynamic soundtrack which I quite enjoy. During peacetime you'll get calming medieval tracks, and during wartime you'll get more bombastic tunes. When certain events or in-game occurrences happen, there'll be stingers to alert you to the happenings, which can disrupt the track that was on. This can be annoying, and I think I'd probably prefer a static soundtrack that perhaps only changed when war was declared. In terms of sound effects, there isn't really anything remarkable. Swords clank in battle, cows moo when you zoom in on a farm, and the UI makes a clicky sound whenever you mouse over something. While I wouldn't call it anything special, it is overall quite immersive and lulls you into your chair, making the hours pass by unnoticed. That's all it needs to do, and it gets the job done and then some. At its heart, Crusader Kings 3 is a game of several interlocking systems that communicate with one another to generate stories. So, what do you actually do in CK3? Well, it's first important to understand the role of which you are playing. You play as a ruler who spends the majority, if not all of their time, in their castle. Imagine the game map as a map on a table, and you are the ruler looking down on it, making your moves. While you, the player, will pretty much always be staring at the map, let's say for discussion your ruler does not. They mosey around, doing regular ruler activities such as managing vassals, organizing armies, and hosting or attending feasts. Usual ruler shit. The game is played in real time as opposed to turn-based, with the option of 5 different speed settings. When you unpause and let the game fly, the simulation begins whether you do anything or not. Characters will declare wars, get married, form alliances, all without you having to do a thing. As the time goes by though, the game is constantly checking for parameters for event fires. An event in CK3 is quite simply a box with text and the involved characters letting you know what has happened and what your options are in response. This is a large chunk of what CK3 is. You're a ruler on a throne and people come to you. For example, you're in peacetime and one of your courtiers comes up to you with a love poem of which you are the subject of. You're a married ruler, and this is highly inappropriate, but also a role-playing game. Maybe you're into it. Maybe your spouse hasn't given you a suitable heir yet, and you'd like to try and speed that process along with a lover. If you indulge this, you have now started what is known as an event chain. If you let some more time pass, maybe that same courtier sneaks through your window and tries to make another move on you. Perhaps your spouse finds out about this torrid affair and uses the secret to blackmail you. Or, worse yet, reveal your secret to the whole kingdom, making more upstanding nobles think less of you. Oh, won't someone please think of the Pope? Things will be constantly happening to you, and you will often be making choices that will result in different outcomes. Another example would be you having low control level in one of your owned provinces. In a different game, your level of control in a region would just be a number that results in either negatives for low control or positives for high control. But CK3 takes it a step further with it being a catalyst for event generation. With low control in a region, it has now flagged you as able to receive an event that represents your peasants' dissatisfaction with your rule of the province. They come to you demanding a tax lien or they will revolt. You can choose to lay off them or crush the rebellion. Either way, the peasants will lay off for a while, but perhaps after this you'll bring your marshal down upon the province to remind them who is boss. All events are created in much the same way and have certain requirements to fire. The game is constantly rolling dice in the background, deciding what potential event will fire next based on the requirements you fulfill. This results in some pretty damn uncanny storytelling that mostly gets things right. I say mostly because it's definitely not perfect. See, the game logic is it'll check which events you are eligible for, and then it'll search for characters that will be involved in the event. This can result in some nonsensical events, such as leaders from across the world appearing in your court to make fun of your small wee-wee. Depending on what speed you play the game at, events can be both spammy and repetitive at times. Sometimes my eyes will just gloss over the pop-up and I'll just click on whatever option looks best so I can get on with whatever it is I was doing. In a way, I imagine this isn't too unlike being an actual ruler. My favourite example of the game doing events well happened to me the other night. I was playing as a character who had been the King of Wales, but was usurped by someone of another dynasty. After some time, well after I personally had forgotten about Wales, my character had a dream about taking it back from the villain that had taken it from me. Event chains like these are where the game really nails the hammer on the head, and thankfully they happen more often than the nonsensical ones. So, we've covered events. They're the things you'll be doing in between everything else you'll be doing. One of the most important things in CK3, and the thing that separates it from other grand strategies, are that characters are characters in the game. If that doesn't make sense, I'll try to unravel it. You are playing as a character in a simulation, who will have a family, friends, and associates, whom of which are all doing their own thing in your court or their respective lands. The same goes for the AI, and after 100 years or so, the game will be filled with characters and dynasties all trying to carve out their slice of the medieval pie. It should be noted that often characters will be created out of thin air to fill a role in an event. At first, this felt like it kind of hurt the believability of the game world, but these characters will never be from a specific dynasty already in the game. Instead, they're their own wanderer class. It kind of illustrates that as a ruler, you don't really give a shit who your low-born subjects are related to, so I use that knowledge to snap back the believability. Every character has a couple traits which determine how they behave. As the player, these traits manifest in a number of ways, such as the stress system or giving you unique options to choose in events. Think skill checks in a game like Baldur's Gate 3 or Fallout New Vegas. They affect how well characters will get along with each other. Different traits will gel or clash with one another, affecting the overall relationship stat between the characters. On top of this, certain traits are considered pious or hedonistic depending on what religion your character follows. The stress system functions as sort of a role-playing guideline. Taking actions that go against your character will result in stress. Build enough stress and you'll have a mental break, which can result in taking a new negative trait to offset the stress. These traits are stuff like emotional eater, drunkard, or melancholy. Stress can also affect your character's health, even causing death if you get too much of it. Stress is also built up in other ways, but the majority of it will come from acting out of character or a close family member dying. Conversely, you are able to decrease stress in a number of ways, but will often come at a cost of gold or prestige. This is a great system, as sometimes it can be difficult to actually put yourself into the shoes of the character you're playing, instead focusing on just doing what is optimal for you at the time. It's not too hard to manage on its own, but sometimes you'll end up playing as a character with an unfortunate set of traits, which most options will result in some stress. As for the AI, traits are the guiding principles to how these characters will act. Ambitious and brave characters are great to give land near your borders, as they will be actively trying to claim more land for their own glory and their liege, which is you. That said, they are ambitious, so there is always the risk that they'll be looking to take the top job off of you. Lusty characters are more likely to have affairs, greedy characters are loath to spend money, and deceitful characters will often join schemes against others. The list goes on. Traits aren't always the most impactful, but just like in real life, you should aspire to surround yourself with good, decent people. Unless you have some specific deviancies or goals, in which case I say go for it. This leads us to another thing you'll be doing a lot of in CK3, which is relationship management. Put simply, every character will have a relationship number that reflects how they feel about you, ranging from -100 to +100. Characters that like you are more willing to agree to things you suggest to them, and are less likely to join schemes against you, such as murder plots or independence wars. Generally speaking, it's best to have people like you. You have many different ways to get people to like you. The simplest way is to start a sway scheme against them, which each month will passively make relationship line go up, as well as fire off events reflecting your attempts to get in this person's good book. You could also send them a gift of gold or a family treasure you have stashed away. You could grant them some land. You could throw a lavish feast to have all your vassals cheering your name. As I write this, I am just astonished by how many interconnected systems there are in Crusader Kings 3. It baffles the mind. It is closer to titles like Dwarf Fortress or Rimworld than it is to the other siblings in the Paradox family. I feel like this review could go on for hours just detailing all the systems, but let's hope it doesn't come to that. There are other ways to further yourself in CK3, such as intrigue and warfare. Warfare is pretty simple, so let's start with that. To declare war, you'll need what is known as a casus belli, which simply means justification for war. There are several reasons to go to war with someone, but the most common is that you have a claim to a title that someone else holds. An example here is at one point I was the King of France, but upon my character dying and succession occurring, the character who was my heir was not the same character inheriting the Kingdom of France. What I do inherit, however, is a claim on the kingdom. Another way to get a claim is simply by using your council to fabricate one. However you got to declaring the war, you must now raise your army, which is done with a click of a button. Your army is made of several units. You have what are known as levies, which are basically peasant rabble. Then you have your men-at-arms, which you can think of as your dynasty's own military, separate from the state. You then have your sworn knights, who are actual characters from your court, and their effectiveness depends on their prowess stat. There is a very real chance of your knights dying in battle, so it can be a good idea to keep those you treasure off the battlefield and save your knight positions for those who you wouldn't mind seeing dead. Once you've raised your army, things are pretty simple. You move your doom stack around the map, taking over enemy territory and winning battles until the war score ticker goes one way or another. It gets pretty Benny Hill at times as the AI knows whether or not it'll win the battle, so they'll typically move their armies as soon as you come within a few provinces. This can be easily circumvented with some micro of your own army, but it isn't particularly engaging gameplay. Though simple, war can get overwhelming when you start getting into more than one of them at a time. This often happens when the AI notices that you are currently weak and it can have a shot at you. Now, instead of Benny Hilling against one opponent, you're doing it against several, which magnifies the unengaging part of the war gameplay. This ends up being a little like the event spam I mentioned earlier. It's not the most fun thing in the world fighting multiple wars, neither in life or this game, and thus is sometimes easier to surrender a county or two so you can focus on the wars you can win. Obviously, the more skillful the player, the more wars one can handle at once, but I don't think it ever becomes more fun per se, no matter how good you are. The other way to get ahead in CK3 is the intrigue system. It itself is far too complex to explain here, but I'll try to boil it down to the important stuff. Any character in CK3 is able to start what is known as a scheme. The two schemes that you'll be using the most often are murder and seduce. Why would you want to murder another character in cold blood? Well, most of the time, it is to shore up succession or destabilize another realm. You might be second in line for a big inheritance, but your stupid brother stands in the way. You might want to invade another kingdom, but they are currently too strong for you to take on. But if you were to murder their ruler, it would mean the realm being split up amongst the ruler's heirs, making it easier for you to make your move. The seduction scheme I'm less sure of the practical use cases for, but at least it's very useful for getting back at your rivals. No, not by sleeping with them, but with their spouse and other family members. These schemes aren't only available to the player, however. The AI also makes use of them. They'll plot to kill you and each other, all in the background without your knowledge. This is where the secret system comes into play, which involves a character being caught in a crime or a lie. I could use my spy master to investigate a vassal's court and hopefully learn secrets about them. If I find a secret, I can then use it to blackmail the character to get leverage in a situation where I need something from them. I could use it to get them to agree to an unfavourable marriage, raise their vassal taxes, or to get them to jump on board my next scheme I plan on running. It's a great mechanic that interconnects with many of the game's systems running around it. The last thing I'd like to mention are mods. This game has a lot of them, though I haven't really indulged too much myself. There seems to be a lot of variety with them, ranging from quality of life stuff to total conversions. Before I started writing this, I chugged a lot of this game and decided I'd try some cosmetic mods, adding clothes for different cultures. It was pretty damn good and additive. I think if you didn't know it was modded, you'd just think it was part of the base game, which is awesome. Mercifully, mods do not disable achievements, so you're free to tune the game to your liking without missing out on them. There is so much more I could go on about with CK3. There's travel, faith and culture, plagues and more, but I think I've said the important stuff here. There really isn't any game quite like Crusader Kings 3, and I think if you have even the faintest interest, it'll be a worthwhile purchase. You don't have to be a historian to play the game either. I wouldn't call the game educational in itself, but it's been a constant Wikipedia prompt for me over the years. It's fun to Google characters before you start playing them and see how history actually went for them. All in all, this is an addictive and fun medieval ruler simulator that has had me hooked for hundreds of hours and will have me on the hook for hundreds of more. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next video.